I've been thoroughly impressed thus far with DC's All In initiative, but not everyone is on the same page as I am. In this episode, we talk about one of those new series from All In and how views may differ on it. It's time for another episode of the Comic Bin Comic Book Podcast. Hit the music.
It's time for the Comic Bin Comic Book Podcast. The podcast you look forward to for all of your news and reviews of the best comic books hitting stands. Whether it's DC,
Batman, Wonder Woman,
Marvel,
Spider-Man,
Image,
Spawn, Saga,
Boom,
Once and Future, Power Rangers,
or whatever book or publisher you follow,
we cover them all here.
this is the place for you.
That's right, it's for everyone.
This is the Comic Bin Comic Book Podcast.
Let's get it.
Hey folks, welcome to another episode of the Comic Bin Comic Book Podcast. I am your host, Theo. This week we got a little short episode for you. As I mentioned last time, I invited my friend Ian from over at the Batman universe to sit with me to talk about the question Along the Watchtower. The first issue came out late last month, and Ian is doing the reviews for this series over at the Batman universe. And of course, I'll have a link in the show notes so that you can go and take a read if you haven't read it already. But I asked Ian to come on because there were certain parts of his review that I didn't necessarily agree with or not agree with, but wanted to elaborate more on because this was a series he and I were both excited about when it was first announced. And his review kind of went, I don't want to say it went south, but no, if you know Ian from following him at the Batman universe or on social media, you know that, like me, he has a special place for Renee Montoya, especially in her role as the Question. And he didn't get what he was expecting. Now, you will see from our conversation that it wasn't that he hated the first issue. He just had different thoughts as far as what he was expecting. So take a look. There's no video of it, so I'll be showing some images from the first issue, courtesy of DC Comics. But take a listen to my conversation with Ian, and when we come back, I'll talk about my one book of the week for comics that came out the first week of December. So here's my conversation with Ian, talking about the Question, All Along the Watchtower #1, and I'll see you on the other side. Hey folks, it's Theo, and I'm here with Ian Miller from the Batman universe. Ian, welcome back to the Comic Bin Podcast. How are you, my friend?
All right, how are you?
I am doing well. I'm waiting for winter to make its way back down south, so I'm sure it's kind of cool up there your way.
Oh yeah, we got the snow.
Oh, really? It's snowing?
Yep.
How much?
Oh, less than an inch, but it's stuck.
Gotcha. At least it wasn't like Buffalo last night. I have a friend who lives
Buffalo, Minnesota, or Buffalo, Michigan?
in New York.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I have a friend who lives in Buffalo who was watching the game, and they're in a blizzard, and in Buffalo proper, it's just cold. There wasn't a snowflake to be found. Crazy lake effect. Do y'all have a lake effect out there in Minnesota?
We have a 10,000 lakes effect.
So, a few weeks ago, on November 20th, the Question, All Along the Watchtower, made its debut from DC Comics, written by Alex Figueroa and Sion Tomei on art. So, Ian and I were both very excited for this series when it was first announced by DC. Both of us being big Renee Montoya as the Question fans. And Ian had the pleasure of reviewing this over at the Batman universe, and I'll drop a link in the show notes to that review. Check it out. But in that review, we kind of had differing thoughts. And first of all, I totally get where Ian is coming from with his thoughts that he had in this review. But I wanted to take an opportunity, considering we're both fans, to have a conversation about this particular issue and then perhaps have a little further talk about where we hoping this might go. Because unbeknownst to me, I didn't pay attention, but Ian mentioned it in the latest episode of the TBU Comic Podcast that this is an ongoing. This isn't a mini-series. So we gotta have a conversation about that, because my thoughts now completely changed if it is something that is planned to be ongoing. So before we get into that, Ian, so let's elaborate a little bit on your review if we can, because you made a good point in your first statement, which was, of course, a little bit of disappointment in how the series was presented compared to what you were looking for. Elaborate on that.
Yeah, I think there's two expectations I had, and I don't want to be a counterfactual reviewer. I say this comic should have been about teddy bears. It is about pizza instead. I am going to tell you why I want a comic about teddy bears. I think I came into this comic expecting it to be Renee Montoya as we've seen her before, kind of a noir detective, hitting the streets, interrogating suspects, finding clues, finding a pattern, with that city streets, city alleyways, dark civilization feeling, and much more of a solo book, like a solo detective book. The way Alex Segura has set it up, and I don't know how much is Segura's pitch and how much is DC's editorial. She's a sheriff heading an entire department. She has a team, including both Ted Kord and Jaime Reyes as Blue Beetles. She's got Tate Cain as her, theoretically supposed to be her boots on the ground, but that also puzzles me since Renee is also a boots on the ground type of character normally, with the exception of the past couple of years of disappointing commissionership.
I almost looked at Kate as perhaps the enforcer.
Yeah, I could see that. And Kate, I mean, we saw a similar dynamic when Renee and Helena Bertinelli, the Huntress, teamed up in the Question Pipeline, which is the backups to Detective Comics while Greg Rucka was writing the Batwoman Elegy storyline, if you want to check that out. It was collected, but that went out of print in 2011 when DC did their relaunch in the New 52.
But Elegy is coming back as a compact.
Elegy is, but
yes,
unfortunately not the backups. I do recommend. I hope that compact edition has the Cutter storyline. It seems like it might, because it has a really hefty page count. And I like Elegy and Cutter together. I think it's a very nice run of comics. But getting back to okay, she also has Animal Man, and who was the last person on her team?
It was I think it was someone with the Challenges of the Unknown, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, and that's the guy who dies at the end of the book.
Right.
So I guess that's why I forgot, because he's dead. So I can see the logic. Even though I think it was not a good idea to make her commissioner for more than an arc, I think, like Harvey Bullock being commissioner, it could have been fine if she was commissioner for an arc of the Batman series. But she was commissioner for a good, 20...
For almost the entirety of Ram V's run.
Yeah, I want to say she was commissioner from 2021 to 2024, so about 3 years. And that's way longer than she should have been. I don't think she works that way, but she was. So we can't just ignore that. At least not if we're picking up right after she leaves that role. And so I can see the logic. I can very much see how she's been an administrator, even though we never saw her being a good administrator, even in Thin Blue Line. So they want her to show that she is still a leader. She has that skill set that she didn't have before. I don't want to be counterfactual, so I'll stick with that. I can see the logic of it. I think the problem for me with the comic we actually got is the same problem I have with a lot of team comics, which is if I don't already love all of the characters on this team, the writer is not doing enough work to make me love them. The writer is not assuming I am a new comic reader. And that is okay if you do love all the characters on the team, but I don't.
I mean, for many may not even know of some of the characters. Like Steph mentioned when we recorded about not knowing much about Animal Man.
Yeah, I mean, I know Animal Man exists, and I know he has a daughter, and he has a famous run by Alan Moore. Sorry, Grant Morrison, and he has a famous run in the New 52, I think by Jeff Lemire. But I haven't read either of those.
Me neither.
So I think the most I've read of Animal Man is in 52, which was good, but kind of a random plot where he's stuck in space with Starfire and... Oh, who's the other guy he's stuck with? Some other dude.
God, as many times as I read 52, I don't remember that. I mean, I remember it. I remember it from.
It doesn't go anywhere. It's like I remember the plot line, but I don't. It never went anywhere.
Yeah, the biggest thing for me in 52 was Kate's debut.
Well, and Renee's journey from being fired from quitting the GCPD to becoming Question. Like that intertwined plot.
That too.
The most powerful for me. And of course, Vic Sage's death. Oh my goodness, it's so good, but so sad.
So, if I'm hearing you correctly, if this had been a Birds of Prey type title, having the original birds, you would be all in. But for the Question, it seems like
I think that he should keep the team smaller. Like he should have Renee, Kate, and maybe, I don't know, Blue Beetle or Animal Man. Because you can really focus in on making people love 3 characters. It's hard to make people love 5 to 6 characters.
Well, one's dead now, so...
Oh, true.
So, would you have preferred, notwithstanding the team setup, would you have preferred a story somewhat similar to what we got in Ron V's run, when Renee was on her own? Every once in a while, she ran into someone. More than likely, it was Cass. But it was a true noir, I gotta figure this out story.
Yeah, I liked that part of Ron V's run. It was probably some of the strongest stuff he did.
So considering where we are now, so I know I mentioned when we recorded how the thing that kind of irks me about this issue, not just this issue, but everything that we're kind of seeing involving the Justice League and the Watchtower is this story of someone from within trying to take out the League. Do you think that's a good story, especially considering it seems to be a plot across the Justice League world in differing forms?
Well, I mean, the problem with this Justice League Unlimited, everyone's part of the Justice League thing, is your cast of potential double agents or people who have been blackmailed or something is simply enormous. So I can see multiple plots going down with the current setup.
Do you think you would prefer a shorter story compared to an ongoing?
So Question did get an ongoing before, but that was in the 70s, I think, going into the 80s. And I, even in the 90s when comics were doing a lot better, Question still got miniseries or team books. Questions hasn't really sustained an ongoing. And even with this team, we don't have any heavy hitters. There's no member of the Trinity like in Justice League Dark when you had Wonder Woman on the team, or even Zatanna. I struggle seeing the business side of how this book is going to last more than 6 issues.
Oh,
maybe
really?
they committed to 12, but
I mean, this sounds worse than what we gave Tim Drake Robin.
which unfortunately got 10.
True.
But should have been 0.
Exactly.
I mean, the setup of this is much better than Tim Drake Robin. It's not. I'm open to seeing Renee as a sort of sci-fi Western sheriff. I think if I sit with that for the next month, I'll probably come into the second issue with a better headset. I'm just like, Renee is sci-fi sheriff. I think that's cool. And I think if Segura really focuses down and gets into Renee's relationships and gets into the clue gathering and the interrogations, that'll be much more what I think suits Renee's strengths.
Do you think, considering the setting of this is on the Watchtower, does this title need a constant appearance of the main leaguers? So that would be, of course, the Trinity and maybe Flash and Green Lantern, the big fellas, the primary folks of the league. Do you think they need to consistently be in here in order to make this successful? Or would you want them consistently making appearances?
I mean, my feeling is that I would like to be in an era of comics where characters like Question and like Blue Beetle and like Kate and even like Animal Man could sustain a title. I just don't think we're there. And the way the Trinity, Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman were handled in this book made it feel like they weren't going to be a big part of it. So I don't think they're going to fall into that trap, but part of me thinks maybe they should so they can survive longer.
Yeah, because, I mean, from how you described it in your review, you feel like they were there just to be on the page to say, hey, Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman are in here. Because they basically said most of the same thing, especially Supes and Diana.
I mean, you honestly could have put them all on the same page and given us 2 more pages with the other characters, in my opinion.
So speaking of the pages, give us a little bit more about your thoughts on the art. I thought it was pretty good.
It is pretty good. It's much more polished than the last time I remember seeing Chen Tormey, who I believe is an Irish artist who worked with Cecil Castellucci on her Batgirl run in the end of the Rebirth era. And I didn't have complaints about the art, but that run was just so bad it just didn't leave a good taste in my mouth. This, I think, is much better, much more polished. He's definitely learned and polished himself a lot in the 3 or 4 years since he did those Batgirl issues. I like the sci-fi look of it. I think he's got a good use of shadows with the colorist. He's got good light and dark, which I think is really essential in a noir detective story. So, to me, the art definitely didn't hold it back at all.
Yeah, the way he has Renee walking around with that gun on, that rifle, that sci-fi rifle on her back was just awesome.
The look is awesome. I'm still really irritated at what it does, though. Like, what does it do? Does it transport only organic matter? Does it vaporize?
Well, I think it does a bunch of things, because I know when she fired it at the now revealed robot, it was almost like a EMP pulse, because it basically knocked it out after everything else had failed. So I'm wondering if it perhaps have multiple capabilities depending upon the situation. Because it was like she figured out it was a robot. It wasn't a real person in there. So she just aimed the thing right out at his head and just bloop, it just went dead. So I'm assuming that was an EMP pulse or something that was directed at it.
I just wish they'd spent a bit more time letting people like me who can't just come up with that. Because that makes sense, but if Renee had said EMP or something as she fired, I feel like that would have made everything a lot clearer.
Who would you want? I'll let you play fantasy editor. Who would you want to be behind it all?
Me wants to see Renee get her vengeance on Vandal Savage. Now I don't know if that'll be possible because that plotline's still going on in Batman. But her confrontation with Vandal Savage was a big part of her journey after becoming a Question. So I'd like to see that. If it's not that, there's always Intergang. She's got good connections to Intergang through 52. An enemy that is very cerebral, but also a reasonable physical challenge, but not someone who's just mostly you have to figure out how to get Superman to come help.
Who would they control on the Watchtower in order to bring it down from within?
Oh man, I don't want to think about one of the team members being a mole because I'm afraid it'd be someone like Ted Kord or even Jaime. I feel like Animal Man would be weird unless it's threatening his family. I mean, I could see that angle.
Or would you think it would be somewhat like what's going on in Justice League Unlimited, where it's this no-name hero who hasn't been heard of in decades, like an Airwave? You know, someone we haven't been introduced yet, but at some point we'll see.
You have to make someone care about that, I think. I mean, it's one of the reasons why I criticize the ending of Hush, because they have the reveal that it was actually a character from who hadn't been seen in 5 or 6 years and hadn't appeared at all in the Hush storyline to that point. And I think that kind of literally pulling out of your butt writing is certainly surprising, but it doesn't mean anything emotionally to the character in the story that's happening. So if they have like a very obscure character who becomes the mole, I think they really need to make us care about that and do it relatively early so when the reveal comes, it matters.
So wait, you didn't like the idea of the Riddler being revealed as Hush?
No, I'm talking about Harold.
Oh, okay. I thought you were talking about. I was kidding about the movie.
Oh yeah. I haven't seen the movie. I've only read the comic.
You haven't seen the movie? Oh, okay. Spoilers.
I mean, people didn't. I know that spoiler, but no one says good things about the movie, which is why I haven't seen it.
Yeah. Well, now you know the ending. It was Riddler. Dumbest thing.
I knew that. So
dumbest thing ever. Or at least one of them. So, what would you expect to see based on the solicitations already for issue 2?
Okay, so based on this, it says that the crime could be someone close to her as the main suspect. And given that we see Kate finding the body, I would say that probably Kate is the suspect, because that's the character she's definitely closest to on the team.
Speaking of finding the body, who was the cat?
The cat?
That walked out of the room with blood on his paws.
Oh, good point. Do you think it might be Beast Boy?
Well,
it
no,
wasn't green, was it?
It wouldn't be Beast Boy, because Beast Boy would have been, if it was Beast Boy, it would have been green, correct?
Right, and I don't think it was green.
No, it was orange. I mean, because Steph, first name that came to Steph was Streaky.
Oh. Maybe it's Clarion's cat.
See, I wonder how Clarion's cat would get on there. It's just so weird.
Well, I mean, if Clarion's cat's on the Watchtower, that is a sign of something not right.
Right.
But I'm sure that, Animal Man being there is going to be why they have the cat there, so that Animal Man can, communicate with the cat and find some clues.
True.
So, without the solicitations, that would be my expectation for what happens next issue.
So, how many issues are you willing to give it before you say, I've had enough?
I mean, nothing about this series... usually what makes me say I've had enough on a book is, just really making characters stupid and terrible. This definitely didn't make any characters stupid or terrible. Unlike, I would say, the current JSA run, where all the characters are just fighting with each other and being cruel, and I understand that that's what they're going for, but that means I don't want to read that book. The characters in this book are mostly getting along and kind of ribbing each other back and forth, and there's some tension, as there should be in a new relationships between a team, but there's nothing like just accusing each other of not caring about justice and all that stuff. So, unless it goes down a really weird path in that direction, which it doesn't seem like it's going to, I can see giving this definitely 6 issues, possibly 12, a full year.
All right, so my last question. Would you hope to see a rekindling between Kate and Renee?
If they don't, I'm going to be a little annoyed, because what's the point of putting them on the same team if they don't? I mean, right?
Right. Because Renee's reaction, seeing Kate sitting, perched up there, saying, "What's up? Sorry I'm late," was just chef's kiss.
Was what you'd expect and want, I think.
Of course. There's nothing wrong with Renee and Kate being happy.
The funny thing is, Greg Rucka doesn't think they'll ever be happy because he thinks that, I want to say he thinks Renee will never settle down. But he does think that they're his OTP for them. He just doesn't think they'll ever settle down together.
Oh, I didn't know that about Greg. That's his one true, huh?
I mean, for those 2 characters. I don't know about all characters, but for Kate and Renee, they're definitely the OTP right there.
Yeah. Well, before I let you go, this is something I started with my last interviewee, and I'm going to kick it off with you again. It's time for rapid fire. You get 2 choices, 1 answer. We may elaborate a little bit, but not too much. Are you ready?
Yep.
All right, here we go. Beast Boy, Animal Man.
Animal Man.
Dr. Fate or Zatanna?
Oh, Zatanna.
Dr. Doom or Dr. Strange?
Doctor Strange.
Okay, well, why? You hesitated a little bit.
I don't really know either one.
Oh. So, I don't know if you're following Marvel now, but Dr. Doom is the new Sorcerer Supreme.
Oh, no.
Yeah,
That's not a good idea.
Marvel got a whole year of stuff set up for him. All right, and this is going to be the last one. And this, I want to see how you pick this one. Stephanie Brown, Batgirl, or Stephanie Brown, Spoiler?
Stephanie Brown, Batgirl, because that's the only time she's had a solo title.
Is that it? I was ready for a speech on that one.
I mean, I can give one if you want, but I was just going rapid fire.
Rapid fire. All right, well, Ian Miller, thank you so much for joining me on the Comic Bin Comic Book Podcast. Again, the title is The Question, All Along the Watchtower from DC Comics. If you haven't read it yet, please do so. I thought it was pretty good, considering what is happening with All In and what DC's doing with this All In initiative. But take a look. Let us know your thoughts. Ian, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
So again, I want to thank my boy Ian for joining me to talk about the question All Along the Watchtower #1. Issue #2 comes out in 2 weeks on December the 18th from DC Comics. I'm definitely going to be picking it up and continuing to read this story. Again, I'm still not seeing how they're going to make a full series out of this, but considering the plans that they have for All In and the All In initiative, it's possible, knowing DC. But we'll see what happens as we get into the second issue. Again, I'm still excited for this focus on Renee and hopefully giving the question a little bit more credence than what Renee had during her run as police commissioner of Gotham City. But before we close out for the day, again, only one book I like to talk about, and that's my book of the week. And there was a lot of stuff that came out that I really enjoyed, whether it was the latest issue of Absolute Superman, which focused on Lois and Clark kind of learning a little bit more about each other, or whether or not it was the latest issue of the Magic Order, that fifth volume, which sees a bunch of assassins coming after Cordelia. But my book of the week is, you know it, Batgirl #2, written by Tate Brombel with art from Takeshi Miyazawa over at DC Comics. And for everything that I loved about the first issue and how it really shined a light on Cass and just her badassdom, this issue took it in a completely opposite direction. In I'm gonna use the word humanize only because Cass has always been this bigger than life character. She she spoke with her actions. She kicked ass. And what we see by the time we get to the end of this issue is Tate Brombel really brings her down to earth and really humanizes her by the undead or the unburied, just whipping her senseless to the point to where her sense to read, to see by reading the motions and the expressions of those she's facing, she doesn't see it. She can't see. And there were several times where she said she can't read anyone. She can't see. And you see in her face by the time the issue ends that there is some real concern. Now, the other thing that really got me with this issue was how you see Bramble tear down Shiva a little bit as she is speaking with the Vietnamese store owner, and a restaurant owner, and how this lady who's very old, very wise, is giving Shiva advice on not just being a good mother, but being a mother, knowing that things aren't going to always go the way they should, but just allowing Shiva to see things from a different standpoint. You know, Shiva said many times she didn't want a daughter just as much as Kat said she didn't want a mama. But you see in that communication between the two moms that Bao, I think her name was Bo Bao, really, she lit a little candle under a little spark under Shiva, and we see by the time the unburied barges in, that she's attempting to reach Cass a little bit more, and I appreciate that. But man, the unburied are no joke, and the one warrior, the one who Shiva fears the most, just really, really took Cass apart. And despite the fact that they were killing and willfully killing, you see that by the end, after Cass and Shiva makes their escape, he doesn't really want that. He just wants they're his target. He wants Cass, he wants Shiva, and that's all it is. But this was an awesome issue. Um, and I'm not just saying that as a Cass mark, as a Cass fanboy, but I really appreciate how you took you took what has always been Cass's strength, her ability to read those she was facing and to know their moves and to just figure it all out before it happened, and you took it away from her, and you just get see her get beaten in a way you haven't seen her get beaten before. And I appreciate Brombel taking Cass there. Now, the point is, at some point, he's gonna build her back up, and I can't wait to see that happen. But I am truly enjoying the series so far after 2 issues. I can't wait for issue 3 in January. But that is my book of the week, Batgirl #2, written by Tate Brombel, with art from Takeshi Miyazawa over at DC Comics. That is going to do it for this episode of the Comic Bin Comic Book Podcast. I want to thank you all for your continued support of the program. Next time, David Pepos returns to the Comic Bin cast, and we're going to talk some more about our favorite Hanna-Barbera superhero, Space Ghost. Issue 8 comes out this Wednesday from Dynamite Entertainment, and we are entering the final set of this series. If you can remember from when David first came on, he said that it was only set for 12 issues plus an annual. So we're now going into issue 8. There's only 5 more issues left, including that annual. So we'll see what our favorite hero is up to at this point, and hopefully I'll be able to ask him a little bit about Cable, Love and Chrome, the series that comes out next year over at Marvel Comics. I hope I can get some info out of him about that. But other than that, I am also going to be reading some books, and maybe I'll talk about 1 or 2 next week, whether it's Batman and Robin or whether it's the Superwoman special. We finally get the story behind how and why Lois was able to obtain Kryptonian power, or we get the Ultimates 1 year in, which is now looking at where things are with the Ultimate Universe from Dennis Camp over at Marvel Comics. So there's a lot of good stuff coming out, and I'll see if once David and I finish, if there's time to talk about some of my favorite books for this coming New Comics Books Day. But see you all next time, and keep reading those comics. That is going to do it for this episode of the Comic Bin Comic Book Podcast. I'd like to thank you all for your continued support of the program. The Comic Bin Podcast, as well as the Comic Book Spot, are a part of the Comic Book Source family of sites and media. You can follow the podcast on Twitter X at comic_bin, or my personal account at BatmanFan_4life. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky, and Threads. We're all over social media. You can also follow our sister site over at thebatmanuniverse.net for all of your news and reviews in the world of Batman. Tune in next time as we give you more in the world of comic books. Again, we truly appreciate your support. But until we meet again next time, keep reading those comics.